This topic is going to discuss about India's service sector. To start with, I will briefly introduce the concept of services and trade in services. Next, I shall explain the role or the place of service sector in Indian economy. Then, we shall discuss about the different types of services and their contribution to Indian economy. And at last, will focus on challenges that service sector is facing at present and is also likely to face in near future. Now here, when we are going to introduce the concept of services and trade in service, let's have a brief look at the history of international trade. Centuries ago, when people started trading between the countries, the policymakers or the traders basically believed that international trade means exchange of goods and never the services. If we look at the early principles of international trade, be it mercantilist principle, Adam Smith's absolute cost advantage principle, or comparative cost advantage principle given by David Ricardo, all these principles basically speak about how international trade can be beneficial to the trading countries. But while trying to explain how international trade can be beneficial, they are concentrating on one fact that trade internationally means just trade in goods. There have never been reference to the service trade during those era of international trading. The reason for this particular belief has been at that point of time, nobody ever believed that something which is not seen, something which is invisible, something which is difficult to be transferring or exchanging the borders of the two countries could actually be traded, and hence services were always considered to be a non-productive sector. But this kind of thinking or this kind of conventional image underwent a change over a period of time. Every economy found that service sector is not only a productive sector but is also a very important and integral part for economic growth of any country. As a result of which, World Trade Organization introduced General Agreement on Trade in Services. This particular agreement basically looks into the different aspects of trade in services and the ways and means to make the trade in services more flexible, more free, and more easy. Now, a service may be defined as a change in the condition of a person or of a good belonging to some other economic unit which is brought about as a result of activity of some other economic unit with the prior agreement of the former person or economic unit. The GATS provided for four modes of service supply. Mode 1 refers to cross-border supply. In this, the service flows from one country to another country and it looks very much like international trade in goods. Example of such kind of services are an architect sending his architectural plan through electronic means, a doctor sitting in India having a teleconference and giving advice to his patient in some African or European countries, a music CD getting traded, or a movie DVD getting traded between the two countries. Now, in such kind of services, we basically can have a look at the goods which are getting transferred to deliver the services. So we feel that basically the goods are getting traded, but in reality, we all know that we are really paying for the services and not for the good in which that particular service is embodied. Mode 2. It speaks about consumption abroad. Now, this is a category of service supply wherein the consumer of a services moves to the producer of a services. This will involve tourism services, education services, or health services. For example, whenever a student from a developing countries obtains admission into the educational institutes of developed country, or a tourist from European country or some other country trying to visit a developing country, or a patient from a developed world trying to obtain the good medical services at a reduced cost in a developing nation. Mode 3 involves commercial presence. This implies the service supplier of one country will establish territorial presence in another country with a view to providing their services. In this case, the service supplier establishes a legal presence in the form of joint venture, subsidiary, representative, or a branch office in the host country and starts supplying services. It includes services such as banking, financial services, or legal advice. Mode 4. This particular mode of service supply is of particular interest to country like India, and it basically speaks about movement of natural persons. It refers to temporary movement of natural persons, where a foreigner moves temporarily into a country to supply a service. Example, software developer from India moving to US or UK to provide software services, or a professor giving series of lecture in some other nation. However, we need to remember that GATS covers only temporary movement. Now, as far as India is concerned, service sector have been occupying quite an important role in terms of its employment potential or its contribution to national income. If we just have a look at the contribution it makes to the GDP, it's over 60%, and that's huge. Labor productivity in services is highest and is increasing over a period of time. One of the reasons why labor productivity in services is higher because service sector has those areas in which skilled and highly skilled professionals are employed. So, a result of which the labor productivity turns out to be much more as compared to the laborer who are semi-skilled or unskilled. Unlike other countries where economic growth has shifted from agriculture to industries, a surprising or an interesting fact about Indian economy is that it has shifted from agriculture to the service sector. And not only that, the growth of service sector has accelerated in the late 80s, and in the late 90s the sector surpassed the growth of the industries to become the fastest growing sector of the Indian economy. Fact that we need to look here is even during the global slowdown, the service sector remained resilient to external shocks. Now let's have look at the place of service sector in the Indian economy. To start with, the contribution of service sector to GDP and economic growth over a period of time. The table below gives a clear idea of how the importance of agriculture sector as a major contributor to GDP has been taken over by the service sector over a period of time, that is from 1950s till date. In 50s, It was agriculture which was contributing more than 55% to India's GDP, and in 2000 decade and at present it is services which has been not only contributing more than 50%, but in fact the share has increased to more than 63% in 2014-15. This table also makes it very clear that agriculture is no more a sector on which the country is heavily dependent upon, and the Indian economy has taken a shift from agriculture to the service sector without, or in fact by bypassing the industrial sector. The graph on this slide makes the things pretty more clear about the way the service sector share in GDP is increasing over a period of time. It's about 2005 to 2014. The graph is provided by Central Statistical Office. It shows how within a short period of time there has been more than 10% increase in the share of service sector in the GDP, which has increased from little over 52% to more than 63% as of today. Point 2 speaks about generation of export revenue and trade surplus. Now, trade surplus is a word or a concept which India can expect to hear only with respect to trade in services. Unfortunately for India, though we have been trading with goods right from our independence, we have never been able to generate a huge trade surplus. If ever there has been, it has been very negligible amount. But when compared to the services, not only it generates huge export revenue, but at the same point of time, its trade surplus has been increasing over a period of time, thus providing relief to the country which has always been facing huge trade deficit and its trade account, that is basically trade in goods. Now, service sector has not only contributed in terms of export revenue, but service exports have actually contributed to the economy in terms of having an inclusive growth rate, economic growth. And how does it do it? There are several jobs and well-paid jobs which are generated in service sector. These well-paid jobs basically are employing skilled and highly skilled labor force of India, and thus helps to increase the productivity of the sector. Because of the exports of services happening, the tax revenues to the government have increased, which helps increasing the revenue for the government, under which later on government can undertake different types of developmental projects and social welfare expenditures for the economy. It has also stimulated domestic demand, including demand for infrastructure. Now, when a particular sector is developing or when a particular sector is growing and expanding, it does not only lead to the expansion of that particular sector, but also the subsectors which are dependent on it and over a period of time to the entire economy. So, when high paid jobs are offered in service sector, these salaries get used by the consumers or the employers to generate demand for different other goods and services available in the market, and hence investment in those areas also increases. This is known as multiplier effect, and over a period of time when the subsectors start growing, the entire economy starts improving, expanding and growing, and this we can say leads to the acceleration of its economic development. Point 3 basically speaks about creation of employment. Now, employment has always been a big concern for Indian economy. With a population of 1.2 billion and a huge workforce, it is not easy for any government to provide job so very easily to each and every person who desires or aspires to work. Reason being, simply there won't be enough resources available at a point of time with the government to provide jobs to each and every one. So in this case, service sector definitely has proved to be a very important source of employment for this workforce in India. Now it has created employment for skilled and semi-skilled workforce, which is a need for the Indian economy. Services like transport, tourism, travel have hired semi skilled laborers, while a pool of skilled and highly skilled professionals have got themselves employed into banking, insurance, finance, or IT. In this way, basically service sector is able to reduce the underemployment which exists usually in the developing countries, wherein if the good jobs are not available, then its labor force gets forced to be underemployed. The total employment in service sector in 2019 as per the data available with World Bank has been 25.3%. So, service sector is providing employment to around one fourth of India's workforce. Point 4 is about support to agriculture and industries. Now, when we look at the economy, there are three sectors that we basically discuss: agriculture, industries, and the services. All these three sectors are interlinked and interdependent. Modernization and growth of any sector would also depend upon how good the other sectors in the economy are doing. Agriculture and industries cannot expand or grow without an equal and desiring support from the service sector. For example, transport, banking, insurance services meet up the needs for transportation and finance required by these two sectors. So also the communication and technological services have enabled the modernization of agriculture and industrial sector. Now, Government of India have launched different schemes for the farmers wherein farmers is provided that information through internet or website with the help of Directorate of Agriculture which are based in every state. Now, if this information can be passed on to the farmers very quickly through internet. At a point of time, the state's Directorate of Agriculture also provides information with respect to weather forecasting, with respect to different schemes to launch for the help of the farmers, or even with respect to the prices of the prevailing products in the market. So also, communication and technological advancement has helped industrial sector by reducing the cost of obtaining information considerably over a period of time. Point fifth is service sector has been able to attract huge foreign investment, particularly so in the software services. It has attracted FDI equity inflows of 43.35 US dollar billions of US dollar, which is 16.8% of total foreign inflows during 2000 to 2015. FDI share of service sector has been over 50%. So half of the foreign investment which has come into India during a decade has been all because of service sector. Financial services, telecommunication, computer software and hardware have been, as expected, the major recipient. Point 6 is growth of infrastructure in the economy. Better infrastructure in terms of good transport, communication, health services, educational institutes, storage facilities are helping in contributing towards the growth of economy. Now, how does it actually work out? It's only when we are going to have a good transport, exchange of goods between the places is going to be easier. A good communication system is going to reduce the cost of obtaining any kind of information in agriculture and industrial sector. A good health services or a good health institutes will improve on the labor productivity because unhealthy conditions of the labor basically can deteriorate his ability to perform to the best of his capacity. A good educational institute or a good quality of education will make labor not only more productive but more skillful in performing certain tasks assigned. Good storage facilities would help in storing different kind of products, especially the perishable products from the agricultural sector, so as to ensure the quality of the product is retained. Now, why are these services or why is this infrastructure important for any economy? Let's look at the view that UNDP gives when with respect to giving the Human Development Index ranking for any country. At present, India's rank and the India's HDI rank is 131, that's 131st, and it's mainly determined on the basis of level of education, life expectancy, and the per capita earnings, which in turn will also depend upon the level of education and the health care facilities available in that particular country. Better the education, better the healthcare services, the individual is going to get good jobs, earn higher, and have a good life expectancy. This is improving on human development ranking of that particular country. A better infrastructure in terms of educational institute and healthcare facilities will improve in improving the quality of the people because a good educational institutes will help more and more people to have high level of education that will make them more skillful and make them ready to get a jobs which are paying them a high salary and will not force them to take up a job in which they not be able to get the required level of income. Growth of communication and services over a period of time, especially through the progress of internet, has enhanced the growth of e-commerce in the country. Now, if we just have a look at the past, which is not even way back, but just a decade back, we would hardly see anybody having an online market or anybody actually be interested in buying online or selling online. A concept wherein you are going to buy without going out of your house or without having to step out to the store or something which was not visualized. But yes, the growth of technology, the growth of telecommunication and the reforms in the internet services has helped businessmen to reap the benefits of e-commerce in the country. Seventh one is it facilitates ease of business. When transportation services, communication services, financial services, technological services are going to be good in that particular country, it will naturally facilitate the ease of doing business. Now, when we speak about the business establishment, that business establishment or a company doesn't only look at the setting up of its venture, but it also looks at how easy it is to do a business in that particular area. India has been known over the years to be a country where it is very difficult to do a business. And that is one of the reasons for that has been the lack of the basic services which are required for the purpose of starting up business activity and also continuing its expansion, modernization, or growth. And since the service sector has been expanding and modernizing over a period of time, particularly so during the last 10 or 15 years, it has been able to facilitate the ease of doing business in India. The last point under this category is service sector has helped to enhance trade relation with developed countries. Now we all know that the world is divided between developed, developing and underdeveloped countries. Developed countries have major say when it comes to any international organization or any international platform. And hence, a good relation with developed countries definitely benefits the developing countries in more than one ways. One of the way in which we would like to benefit ourselves when it comes to developed countries is attracting huge foreign investment. And service sector of India has basically helped India to do that. Now, though India was trading with agricultural goods and the industrial goods for quite some time, it has not managed to create an impact for itself in the global market. Reason being, agriculture goods are inelastic, and as a result, there is limit to the amount of consumption that can happen. Secondly, industrial goods in developed countries are produced at a much lower cost as compared to these goods being produced in Indian market, and hence it will be very difficult to cut into the developed markets for the Indian industrial products. And hence, one way which or the one sector which helped India to establish itself as a knowledge hub has been the service sector, and particularly the software services. With a huge pool of English speaking population which was skilled enough to perform the task required in the developed countries, that too at a one third or a one fourth rate at which it would cost the producer in the developed countries. It has helped India to create a niche for itself in the global market. We have very competitive prices at which we can offer our services to these developed countries to get the production happening or to get the production going. Developed countries have been major trade partners for India. In fact, US has been our major export partner, and it was a major trading partner a few years back before China took over, for the simple reason that we import a lot more from China than from any other country. US has been the largest export destination, followed by UK and European countries, also Canada. India not only exports services but imports bulk of its services from countries like Australia, France, Germany, Japan, Korea, UK, and US. A sizable amount of foreign investment basically takes place in software services, and this flow comes from the developed countries. Let's have a look at the composition of service sector as given by National Industrial Classification in 2008. There are several services which are included under this classification. The main one being wholesale and retail trade, transportation, information and communication, financial and insurance services, real estate, education, public health, and other services including entertainment, recreation, and others. The jurisdiction of the service sector comes under Union, State, and in concurrent list. In Union list, we have telecommunication, postal broadcasting, financial services, national highways, and mining services. Whereas state list includes healthcare and related services, real estate services, retail services, services related to agriculture, hunting, and forestry. The co-current list of services jurisdiction will include professional services, education services, printing and publishing services, and electricity services. Let's move on to the next subtopic, that is types of services and their individual contribution to Indian economy. The first one being the most important, that's information technology and IT enabled services. Now, we all know that service sector has been contributing a huge percentage or a huge share to the country's GDP. It's helping in generation of employment and increasing the level of incomes and providing for a better standard of living. But within the service sector, which includes financial, insurance, real estate, education, and health, it is basically the IT and IT enabled services which has helped India to create that global impact which we see as of today. India is the world's largest sourcing destination for the information technology. It accounts for approximately 67% of US 124 to 130 billion market. IT employs about 10 million workforce. India is also gaining prominence in terms of intellectual capital, as can be seen with several global IT firms setting up their innovation centers in India. The Indian IT and IT enabled industry is divided into four major segments, which includes IT services, business process management, software product and engineering services, and hardware services. The IT and the business process management sector in India has been growing at a rate of 15% from 2010 to 2015. IT sector is expected to grow at 11% and triple its current annual revenue to 350 billion by 2025 as per the forecasting of NASSCOM. Computer software and hardware services in India have attracted FDI inflows worth 18.17 billions and during the period of 2000 to 2015 as per the information provided by Department of Industry Policies and Promotion. The export revenue from these services as per NASSCOM in 2015 has been 88,000 millions. Second is retail trade. It accounted for close to 11% of country's GDP in 2013-14 and provided employment to 8% of India's workforce. India has been the world's fifth largest global destination in the retail space. The single brand segment has received an FDI inflows of 344.9 million during 2000 to 2015. And the moment the multi-brand retail sector bill gets the final nod and the approval from the central government, we will also see a huge FDI coming in that particular sector. Third being tourism, travel and hospitality. Hotels and restaurants have contributed around 1% to India's GDP in 2013-14. Tourism is also a large employment generator beside being a significant source of foreign exchange for the country. The industry is expected to generate around 13 million jobs across subsegments such as restaurants, hotels, travel agents, tour operators. And we have to remember a fact here is the kind of employment that is generated in the tourism and travel sector mainly caters to the need of semi-skilled workers in that particular country. During the period 2000 to 2015, the hotel and tourism sector attracted around 8.48 billion of FDI. The tourism and hospitality sector is among the top 15 sectors in India to track the highest foreign direct investment. India has secured 40th rank in Tourism and Travel Competitive Index as per the World Economic Forum's report in 2017. The next service is transport services. India's infrastructure and transport sector contributes about 5% of India's GDP. India has the world's second largest road network in quantitative terms, covering more than 4.3 million kilometers. And we'll have to take the efforts very soon to also improve on the quality of this road network so as to ensure the smooth travel and smooth transport. In 2013-14, The contribution of transport, communication, storage, and services related to broadcasting to GDP was 6.57%. The share of railways and road transport was 0.36% and 3.19% to GDP, while that of communication and services related to broadcasting contributed a share of 1.69%. The export revenue in 2014-15 from transport sector has been 17,476 millions. Next is shipping and port services. Around 95% of India's trade by volume and 68% in terms of value is transported by sea. With a world share of 1.7%, India is ranked ninth in 2014 among developing countries in terms of container ship operations. The cargo traffic of Indian ports increased by 8.2% in 2014-15. The next is telecommunication services. India is currently the world's second largest communication market. The deregulation of FDI norms has made the sector one of the fastest growing and a top 5 employment opportunity generator in the country. The industry has attracted FDI worth 17.7 billion during 2000 to 2015. The Indian telecom sector is expected to generate 4 million direct and indirect jobs by 2019 as per the estimates provided by a consulting firm in India. Next is real estate and construction services. In India, real estate is the second largest employer after agriculture and is expected to grow at 30% over the next decade. In 2013-14, it contributed close to 14% to country's GDP. India has been found to be one of the most preferred destinations in the Asia Pacific. Overseas funds accounted for more than 50% of all investment activity in India in 2014 compared with just 26% in 2013. It comprises of four subsectors, which is housing, retail, hospitality, and commercials. The housing sector alone contributes 5 to 6% to country's GDP. The construction industry ranks third among 14 major sectors in terms of direct, indirect, and induced effects in all sectors of the economy. The construction development sector in India has received an FDI of 24.16 billion in 2000 to 2015. The Indian real estate market is expected to touch 180 billion by 2020. Let's have a look at the financial services. The sector comprises of commercial banks, insurance companies, non-banking financial companies, cooperatives, pension funds, mutual funds, and other smaller financial entities. The financial sector in India is predominantly a banking sector, with commercial banks accounting for more than 64% of the total assets held by financial system. It has contributed nearly 6% to country's GDP in 2014-15. As far as the insurance sector is concerned, India's life insurance sector is the biggest in the world with about 360 million policies. India is the fifth largest insurance market in the world in terms of premium volume. FDI in the insurance sector stood at 341 million in March to September 2015. And export revenue from insurance sector in 2014-15 accounted for 2,201 million. Next is healthcare and education services. Healthcare has become one of the India's largest sectors, both in terms of revenue and employment. It comprises of hospitals, medical devices, clinical trials, outsourcing, telemedicine, medical tourism, health insurance, and medical equipment. The hospital and diagnostic centers attracted FDI of 3.21 billion between 2000 to 2015. India has one of the largest higher education systems in the world. The education market is worth 100 billions, and currently the higher education contributes 59.7% of the market size, which includes school education, preschool segment, technology, and multimedia. FDI inflows in education sector in India has been around 1,171 million between 2000 to 2015. This graph provided by Central Statistics Office basically gives an idea about the share of each subsector of services in India's GDP, the highest coming from the non-services, which basically includes computer software services. The last subtopic is challenges ahead of India's service sector. Service sector in India has no doubt increasingly contributed to India's GDP growth, employment, trade and investment. But there are still many issues which are prevailing and which are preventing the inclusive growth of service sector. First one being slow GDP growth rate during the last decade. Last decade saw a GDP growth rate of even less than 4%, thus affecting the growth of service sector and its expansion plans. Service sector has not been able to create enough jobs as expected in terms of numbers or the quality of jobs. Now, since Indian economy has shifted from agriculture to the service sector and not agriculture to the industries, it was highly expected from the service sector to create huge employment for the semi-skilled and the skilled workforce for India. But somehow it has not lived up to an expectation at that particular level. Globally competitive in just one industry, and that's computer and information services. Unfortunately, India's growth in trade in services is highly lopsided. We are highly dependent on the growth of just computer and information services. Our growth in financial services is very limited as compared to our growth in computer information services. A high dependence on one subsegment in a particular industry could prove disastrous to a particular country in wake of any major policy changes happening with respect to outsourcing in the developed countries. India has not managed to attract huge FDI in spite of having the potential to do so. No doubt we discussed about the FDI being attracted in different subsectors of the service in the Indian economy, but still India could have attracted much more FDI than what the real figures actually depict. The above issues pertain due to the following challenges faced by service sector. Unfortunately, service sector is facing different kind of obstacles and different kinds of roadblocks. The first one being employment opportunities and quality of education in India. There exists a skill shortage in ICT and organized retail sector. According to Electronic and Computer Software Export Promotion Council, approximately 5,000 people are needed every year to meet the demand of ICT industry, but the total available from the Educational and Training Institute is only a third of this number. This clearly signifies a total mismatch between the supply and the demand. The number of qualified professionals required are more as compared to the qualified professional available. This leads to rise in salaries, high attrition rates, and high cost of operation. Now, this has been or is going to be a major obstacle or a challenge for the India's software services, because we ought to remember here a big fact that India has been able to provide software services to the developed market only because they are cost competitive, only because the prices that we offer these services to the developed countries are one third or one fourth of their domestic cost. So, if there exists a mismatch between the demand and supply, or the future continues wherein the demand for the professionals is more as compared to what our educational institutions can provide, then this increase in salaries might affect the rate at which the services will be provided to the developed countries, reducing to huge loss in the international markets. What has been found is there has been mismatch between the skills required and the skills available. And that is why many a times when a laborer wants to shift from the informal to the formal sector, he finds it very difficult because the skills required are not matching what the skills the laborer can offer. The gross educational enrollment ratio in India is low, and there are wide variation in quality across the institution. Unfortunately, in India, the degrees granted by some private universities are not recognized even within India, and thus further affecting their employability. In many cases, companies have to invest substantial in training employees, which again increases their cost of operations. Also, labor productivity is found to be lower in social services like healthcare and education, which affects the inclusive growth. Taxes and subsidies is the next problem for the service sector of India, because India has a high corporate tax rate of 30 to 40% compared to around 17% in Singapore and up to 25% in China. For commodities like petroleum, there are multiple taxes and levies that vary across states. The implementation of GST is expected to bring in the required level of uniformity in tax structure, which is going to be a big boost to all the sectors in the economy. Third one is access and availability of good infrastructure, which somehow is lacking in India till date. Government investment in infrastructure is much lower as compared to the expected level. Most ICT companies have to invest in power units due to erratic power supply. This increases their cost. But sometimes they do not have an option, because if they do not invest in power units, they have to waste on the days of operations, which ultimately adds up to the production cost. Companies in construction, ICT, hospital services, and retail, among others, find it difficult to acquire property due to lack of urban planning, restrictive zoning regulations, outdated laws related to land convergence, and lack of clear ownership and the titles to land. This causes delays in project implementation. In addition, due to poor infrastructure planning, the full benefits of existing investment cannot be reaped. Hence, companies can never achieve or very find it difficult to achieve economies of scale. The government needs to act as facilitator so that the private developers have access to basic facilities like land. Transport industry also needs redesigning and proper planning. Due to lack of good road network, there is tremendous pressure on railways, and this has led to increase in the railway freight rates for different industries, ultimately increasing the cost for the industrial sector. There is a need for proper urban and infrastructure planning. The focus should not only be on creating new infrastructure but also on efficiently using the existing infrastructure. The fourth major roadblock for the service sector expansion and growth has been the research and development and ICT. Investment in research and development would ensure access to cheaper technology and by disseminating knowledge. But our expenditure on research and development has been as low as just 0.8% of GDP in 2012. In 2014, India had 18 internet subscribers per 100 inhabitants compared to more than 49 in China and more than 84 in Republic of Korea. This would be a cause of concern amidst India's dream of becoming a knowledge hub. Investment in research and development should be encouraged by government through public and private ventures. We require research and development and an advanced technology because that is basically what ensures a higher growth rate of any particular sector and ensures rapid expansion. We cannot expect service sector to generate jobs or create employment which will provide high salaried jobs or contribute in a big way to the country's GDP if we do not provide it with the basic requirements which are required. Research and development helps in innovating, inventing new ideas, new concepts, which basically helps the country and the rapid expansion of that particular sector. And hence, India needs to increase its expenditure on research and development as a percentage of GDP. Fifth is international trade. The biggest challenge for India is to diversify its service sector and also international market. India's trade in services largely comprises of just one thing, and that is computer and software services on which we are heavily dependent. And also to add up to this headache, our exports are concentrated in just few markets. US accounts for more than 57% of total computer software services exported in 2013-14, followed by 17% of exports to United Kingdom and Singapore, Austria and Australia. 90% of India's software services are targeted to just 10 nations, while remaining 140 countries account for just less than 10% of our export. This is something that Indian companies, Indian government needs to give a major focus on. You cannot have such a concentrated market wherein the buyers for your product or buyer for your services are so less, because a certain policy change which can adversely affect India will basically hit India's service sector in a very harsh or a rude way. We have 140 countries cross who are today importing our services in software, and we ought to capitalize on that. We need to diversify our services trade or software service exports to all these countries. A country cannot sustain its global position in trade and services by just exporting manpower. Here, the last slide discuss about the different references which have been used for preparing the material on this particular chapter.